Okay, guys, let's get our science books out for science today and open them up to page 269. We have 4 days of class left before Christmas break. So we finished Unit 5 yesterday with our test, and we're going to go on to the next unit today. And this is one of those things that I didn't get taught to you before the first benchmark, and I was supposed to. And so we're just going to spend these last 4 days quickly kind of going through this chapter in your book, this Unit 6 in your book, and that way you will have learned it anyway. And in case it's on the next benchmark, you'll know it. This is the last unit in your book on animals, and then after Christmas we'll come back and talk about the Earth a little bit. So lesson 1 is on page 269, and for these 4 lessons we'll have a little lesson quiz at the end of each lesson on the vocabulary and a couple of the topics from the lesson. So make sure you listen, make sure you have your book and follow along. Of course, underline those vocabulary words in your book. Go use them for the little quizzes. Use your book for the quizzes. There's no reason to try to guess. You got your book right there. So just follow along, and you should make a good grade on the quizzes. So let's get this first one done. And this is lesson 1 of Unit 6. It's called What Are Populations, Habitats, and Niches? Populations, habitats, and niches. So these are 3 words that are going to be our vocabulary words for this lesson. Let's turn it over to page 279 and talk about who lives where. Rainforests have rainy weather. Deserts have dry weather. Each place meets the needs of the organisms that live in it. All of the living and non-living things in an area make up an environment. We knew that from our last test we just took yesterday. The living things in an environment include people, plants, and animals. The non-living things include water, air, soil, and water. Those things are not living, are they? They're not alive. Water, air, soil, and water. All of the non-living things in an area and their interactions make up I said that wrong. All of the living and non-living things in an area and their interactions make up an ecosystem. So notice the difference between an ecosystem and an environment. An environment is all the living and non-living things in an area, but an ecosystem adds and their interactions. So how the non-living things and living things interact with each other. An ecosystem may be as large as a lake or as small as the area under a rock. Ecosystems are found everywhere organisms live and interact, in water or on land. Some ecosystems include coral reefs, savannas, swamps, rainforest, and polar ecosystems. All parts of an ecosystem are connected. For example, the soil and the temperature of a place determines the type of plants that can grow there. In turn, the types of animals in an ecosystem depend on the plants it contains. So you see how they're interacted. If you want to grow a nice tree that grows around here, you can't grow it in the desert, can you? Because it wouldn't have enough rain. So the amount of rainfall, the type of soil, they all are part of the ecosystem, and certain things can grow there and certain animals can live there because of the ecosystem. There's a great variety of plants and animals thrive in rainforest, where the weather is always warm and wet. Coral reefs are made up of the outer skeletons of coral animals. These reefs are home to many types of organisms. There's 2 ecosystems, a rainforest and a coral reef. Polar ecosystems are very cold and dry. Organisms that live there have adaptations to survive the cold weather. Organisms that live in the wetlands, such as swamps, where pools of water cover the land, have adaptations too. Cypress trees, for example, have strong trunks and thick roots that hold the tree in place. Those are those adaptations like we talked about last chapter. Organisms are not evenly distributed among the different ecosystems. The greatest diversity of plants are found in the tropical rainforest. By comparison, few plants live in the polar ecosystem. Why is that? Why do you think more plants live in the rainforest ecosystem than the polar ecosystem? It's kind of common sense, isn't it? The rainforest gets lots of rain and it's warm, so plants grow well. Polar ecosystem, it's below freezing and the ground's covered in ice and snow. Plants can't grow there, or not many can. So there's the types of ecosystems affect the types of plants that grow there. Within a large ecosystem, there are smaller ecosystems. Some frogs in tropical rainforests, for example, live their entire lives perched on a few trees. Similarly, in the ocean, certain fish, sponges, seaweeds, that didn't say that. Certain fish, sponges, seaweeds, sharks, and sea turtles make their homes in or around coral reefs. Many of these organisms could not live elsewhere in the ocean. Coral reefs make up less than 1/10 of the ocean ecosystems, but about 1/4 of all kinds of sea animals live in or around the coral reefs. So all kinds of different ecosystems: rainforest, polar, ocean ecosystems, tropical rainforest, tree ecosystems with the frogs. So coral reef ecosystems, all kinds of different ecosystems. Remember, it's the living and non-living things in an ecosystem and how they interact. So let's see, which one of these would live where? Would the walrus, would he plop around on the African savanna? I don't think so. A walrus lives in a polar ecosystem. The giraffe, though, he lives in the African savanna. So you see, they're adapted to their ecosystem. Remember, the giraffe's long neck helps it reach leaves at the top of tall trees. And that walrus, he's got a lot of blubber on him, doesn't he? It keeps him warm in the cold polar ecosystem. Nearby neighbors. You and your neighbors are part of a community. Plants and animals form communities too. Look at this picture. The zebras, the elephants, the grasses, the shrubs, they all, in fact, all the living things shown form a community. Here's one of those words you need to know. A community is made up of all the organisms that live in the same place. It's like your neighborhood. All you people live in the same place. You're a community. Natural and human activities change communities over time. On the savannas of Africa, for example, water is scarce during the dry season. As a result, many organisms die. Fires are also common. Lightning causes most of these fires. However, people start some too. Fires kill some organisms, but many more survive. Grasses have deep roots that are not harmed by the fire. Some trees have thick, fire-resistant bark. Moles, gophers, and other small animals stay away from fire by hiding underground. Larger animals such as zebras, antelopes, lions, and hyenas run fast to escape the fire. Spring thunderstorms bring the rainy season to the savanna. Grasses, shrubs, and trees grow back quickly. Animals that survive the fire give birth to their young. With so much grass to eat, the mothers are able to make enough milk to feed the calves, and the animal populations grow. So look at this community of animals here. You got the gazelle, the zebras. Can't tell what that is, but you got all these animals living together in a community, and so that's part of their ecosystem. And the community is part of the ecosystem there. Elephants, antelopes, rhinoceros, cattle, egrets all make up the community within the savannas. A population may have a few members or hundreds of them living close together. Population, here's another word. A population is a group made up of the same type of individuals in the same ecosystem. So this is the community. You've got elephants, zebras, gazelles, but they're not a population because they're different types of animals. They're just a community. A population is how many gazelles only live in this ecosystem? How many zebras only? There's a population of zebras. There's a population of gazelles. There's a population of elephants. So a population is a group made up of the same type of individuals in the same ecosystem. Antelopes might live in the same community as the elephants, but antelopes make up one population and elephants make up another. Populations change due to the natural causes. If spring rains do not fall, grasses in the savanna will not grow. Without enough food, some animals and their young will not survive. So populations can change. The environment, the ecosystem can help the population increase or decrease. Increase means more of them. Decrease means less of them. Like it said, if it's a drought and there's no grass to eat, then there's not as much food for these gazelle to eat. And so they die. Some of them die. So their population decreases. But if there's a lot of rain and lots of grass, then it will increase because they have more to eat. Turn to page 274. A place of one's own. All organisms have the same basic needs. Different organisms meet their needs in a number of ways. Read on to find out where an organism finds what it needs in an ecosystem. Ponds are busy ecosystems filled with different populations of organisms and habitats. In and around ponds, the habitats of many organisms overlap. As a result, the different kinds of organisms often have to interact. Tadpoles, mosquito larvae. Mosquito larvae and tadpoles often share the same habitat. They use the same resources for food and shelter. It keeps saying habitat. What's a habitat? We're about to find out. Organisms find the resource they need in their habitat. Here's another word for your quiz today. A habitat is the physical part of the ecosystem that meets the needs of the organisms. The physical part of the ecosystem that meets the need of the organisms. It's their home. It's all the things in their little home area. Organisms find food and shelter in their habitats. It's the food they eat there. It's the place they live there. Maybe it's in a tree. Maybe it's underground. Maybe it's in the water. Every organism in a habitat has a role or niche. So a niche is the role an organism has in its habitat. The way an organism interacts with a habitat and gets food and shelter are part of its niche. Every organism has body parts that help it find its niche. A duck, for example, has webbed feet and oily feathers to help it swim and stay warm. Some animals, such as frogs, change niches during their life. At first, tadpoles live in water, breathe through gills, and eat algae. As adults, frogs breathe through lungs, live at the water's edge, and eat insects. Organisms compete for resources when their habitats and niches overlap. Tadpoles and mosquito larvae, for instance, compete for algae in a pond. Crowded plants at a pond's edge may compete for a place to grow and for sunlight. So there's the adult frog and a tree swallow. As tadpoles grow into adult frogs, their niche changes. Adult frogs compete with tree swallows for food. They both eat insects. So you got two populations living in this ecosystem. You've got frogs, and you've got tree swallows. And they both have a niche. They both have something they do, a role. Both of them eat insects in this ecosystem. And so since they're both eating the same thing, they're competing for that type of food. They're competing for insects. And most likely in an ecosystem like a pond area right here, there's a lot of insects because all animals need some water, right? So they probably have plenty of food. But if the insect population decreased and they're competing for the insects, then their population's probably going to decrease too. Okay. What else in this ecosystem do you think might eat insects? Is there anything else that would be competing? Frogs, birds, some fish eat some insects that might live on the water. Other birds maybe. Yeah. So there's several animals that can compete for the same food in an ecosystem if they share a habitat. All right. So you've got these words today that you need to make sure you know. Oops, went too far. Habitat, niche, ecosystem, population, community. Ecosystem is all the living and non-living things in an environment and the way they interact. The habitat is the area where an animal has its home, where it gets its food. Its niche is the role it plays in its ecosystem and habitat, whether it lives in the water, lives in a tree, eats insects, eats other animals. Okay, well, I lost my train of thought. I had a phone call. I think we got to habitat, niche, population, remember, is all those animals that are the same type of animal that's living in an ecosystem. Like we looked at the picture, all the gazelles or all the elephants, they make up a population. You couldn't have a population that included both elk and deer because they're different types of animals. You'd have a population of elk and a population of deer. Then a community, just think of your neighborhood. It's all the animals who are living together in a certain ecosystem. They make up a community. Okay? All right, you're going to have a little quiz today, so make sure you check out that and use your book. Make sure you get those questions right. No reason not to make a 100 on it because you can use your book for the quiz. Finish up this last couple of days before Christmas break with some good grades. All right, see you later.